Hello, friends. It is great to be with you on this day. I'm excited to get back in the Word with you. We are in the 5th chapter of the book of Proverbs. And in this chapter, Solomon is teaching his son wisdom with regard to the issue of adultery. He sees this as a potential tripping hazard in his son's life, no doubt in any life. And you'll hear the words of this are always oriented toward his son. And so when it refers to adultery, it talks about an adulterous woman. And yet, Solomon's not at all trying to teach us that women are immoral and men are not. Men can be just as immoral. It just happens to be the recipient of this teaching is his son. So this is why he's given the warning in this way. As we enter into this, I want to challenge you to look at this through a broader lens. In the 16th chapter of Matthew, Jesus refers to the people as an adulterous generation, as a generation that has turned from God and they're worshiping their practices, or they're worshiping false gods, or in other words, they have become unfaithful in who they are. So he calls them a wicked and an adulterous generation. I think that as we dig into Proverbs 5, we can look at this as a sin specific, the sin of adultery, and we can also look at it in a broader sense of looking at the image of adulterous generation, what that is in our relationship with God. So let's dig into the scriptures together. Okay, chapter 5, starting out with verse 1, we hear, "My son, pay attention to my wisdom, turn your ear to my words of insight." And so we've heard this kind of introduction. In fact, we've heard this kind of phrase throughout Solomon's teaching in Proverbs thus far. He's just iterating again and again, "Son, I'm not just trying to fill your ears with empty knowledge. I'm trying to pour out to you the wisdom of our God, the wisdom that comes through my father David, and the wisdom that God bestowed on me when I asked him for that to be able to lead the people." And so, Solomon is certainly wanting to be a wise king, but he desperately wants to be a wise father, and we see that in his committed instruction to his son in the book of Proverbs. So he goes on, "My son, pay attention to my wisdom, turn your ear to my words of insight, that you may maintain discretion and your lips may preserve knowledge." So he's telling his son, you need to keep these close to you. You need to keep them, we've said, wrapped around your neck like a necklace. They need to be close to your heart. They need to drive your life, that what comes out of your mouth and how you live your life is guided by God, that the words that come out of your mouth are not just whatever happens to occur to you in the moment, but that you speak with wisdom and that you put forth what is good and right and true. He says, "For the lips of the adulterous woman drip with honey, and her speech is smoother than oil." And so Solomon draws this very poetic image of one trying to entice us to sin. He says that the lips drip with honey, and the speech as smooth as oil. When we think about sin, whether it's enticing toward the act of adultery or whether it's enticing toward any sin in general, we think about the words and how appetizing they are, how appealing they are. There also may be an image of the lips here as being part of that seduction, and so sometimes it's the physical images of what is before us that entices us to want to consider the sin. But I warn you, the words, that so often the enticements to sin are spoken with such inviting and enticing words that if you only take hold of this, if you only turn in this direction, then you will find joy, or you'll find satisfaction, or you'll find fulfillment, or you'll find happiness. Friends, there is so much that evil promises, that sin promises, but it never delivers on. Listen to how Solomon unpacks what happens when we buy into this. He says, "But in the end, she is bitter as gall, sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave." He's just warning. These words, they promise so much, but they lead to nothing but death and destruction. It says, "She gives no thought to the way of life. Her paths wander aimlessly, but she doesn't even know it. Now, my son, listen to me. Do not turn aside from what I say. Keep to a path far from her. Do not go near the door of her house." So I want to pause right there and look at that image. Keep to a path far from her. Friends, when we think about sin, and the temptations and the things that try to allure us, I wonder how often we follow this wisdom. Keep to a path far from that enticement, far from that allure, far from that temptation. Is that how we act when we're faced with temptation towards sin? Or do we tend to believe that we can get pretty close and still be strong enough to withstand, to withhold, to not engage in? If we keep playing with sin, it's going to win. The dangers of our flesh, the leanings of our flesh are incredibly strong. And if we keep on feeding those leanings, those lusts, friends, we're going to cave. We want to be faithful to God, but then we keep on saying, okay, let's see how close I can get, how close I can get, how close I can get. It's like walking up to the edge of a cliff and keeping on edging a little bit and a little bit, centimeter by centimeter and by centimeter, and saying, look, I can stay here. I'm not tipping over the edge. And then as you get closer, you say, okay, well, I'm going to get down to millimeter by millimeter by millimeter, but I'm going to keep on toying with this idea of I know I could tip over and fall to my death. But I won't. I'm just going a little bit at a time, and I'm in total control. And then you hit that tipping point, and that is what happens with sin. We can't toy with it. And so Solomon warns, give this wide berth, take a fat path far away. Stop walking near. Stop walking anywhere near. Give it a wide berth. Go as far around as you can. And avoid sin at all costs. Avoid the temptation that leads to sin at all costs. Do not play with it. So it says, keep to a path far from her. Do not go near the door of her house, lest you lose your honor to others and your dignity to the one who is cruel, lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich the house of another. At the end of your life, you will groan when your flesh and body are spent. And so he just says, you don't recognize the cost of sin. You don't recognize the cost of, specifically to a son, of adultery until you have to pay the cost. Until you are full in, until you've engaged in it, and you begin to have to pay the cost, and you begin to lose all of these things. And you'll look and you'll begin to groan as your flesh, as your body are spent, and you look at your life and you realize the path that you have taken. Listen to how Solomon continues. You will say, how I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. So he's kind of looking back with this regret of what led him here. So he hated the discipline. He spurned the correction. I would not obey my teachers or turn my ear to my instructors. And I was soon in serious trouble in the assembly of God's people. So he says all of these things, that the discipline and the guidance and the teaching that was available in his life, all the wisdom, all the understanding that was poured into him, and he ignored it all, and here would be the cost. And the final cost is not just the loss of all these things, not just regretting the sin that we've committed, but ultimately it says, I was soon in serious trouble in the assembly of God's people. In other words, what we thought was hidden, what we thought was in private, what we thought was secret, and that we could keep masked from everybody else, at some point will be exposed. We'll have the embarrassment and the shame of all of God's people seeing that we've put on a show, we've put on an image of being faithful when behind the scenes we were adulterous. Be it we're talking the act of adultery or the image of an adulterous, a rebellious, an unfaithful people of God. I want to finish this off looking at Solomon takes a turn here, and he says, drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. In other words, be blessed by what you have. Look at what you have and embrace it and treasure it. Stop getting into the mindset of the grass is greener on the other side, because, friends, I believe that is one of the greatest tools of Satan, is to tempt us with the image of greener grass. It says, should your springs overflow in the streets, your streams of water in the public squares, let them be yours alone, never to be shared with strangers. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. A loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated with her love. Why, my son, be intoxicated with another man's wife? Why embrace the bosom of the wayward woman? He closes in verses 21 through 23 with these words, For your ways are in full view of the Lord, and he examines all of your paths. The evil deeds of the wicked ensnares them. The cords of their sins holds them fast. For lack of discipline, they will die, led astray by their own great folly. Friends, whether we are talking about adultery in specific and all that we lose in terms of a blessed marriage and the blessed relationship there and the respect of those that know us, and whether we're talking about that or whether we are talking about unfaithfulness in our relationship with God, where we might put on an image and have all the appearance of being a faithful Christian, but behind the scenes, we know, and God knows, that we're living unfaithfully. This is a day to look at that, to bring that before God, to say, God, I'm just going to confess this to you right now. I know this is an area of my life where I've been living unfaithfully, where I've hidden it and I've continued to enjoy this worldly temptation, this worldly sin. I've walked in its waters, and Lord, I realize it is robbing me of life, and I am living in a little bit of hiding in part of my life. And so, Lord, I confess this to you today, that I may be freed from it and freed for joyful obedience. And Lord God, I am blessed, and I claim the forgiveness that you offer me through the Son who died on the cross for my sin, died to free me from sin and all the guilt and shame that come with it. Friends, whatever it is in your life where that might have a hold on you, I invite you to release it, to be freed from it, to not let an adulterous mindset in terms of our walk with God hinder us, shame us, cause us to lose everything. And if the sin specific to this chapter, if the actual sin of adultery is something that you're wrestling with in your life, whether it's through the physical act or whether it's through other images that you employ, friends, I want to challenge you to confess it before God, to be freed and released from it. Let us be a people who hunger after being the people of God in the whole of our life, that we may be faithful in our relationship with God, that we may be faithful in all of our relationships. Friends, God bless you. God keep you. Know that God loves you, and so do I.